Hi, folks. Terry Martin. We're joined by Jeff Berkowitz. We're going to be looking at some of the big stories of this week. And Jeff, everyone should know that coming up in just over a year, we're going to have a governor's race, and you got some breaking news on that. What is it that you can tell us?
The breaking news, Terry, is as of October 7, when we're taping, a likely candidate, I'll put it that way, a likely candidate for governor in the GOP primary would be Aurora Mayor Richard Irvin. He was elected mayor of Aurora, the second largest city in the state of Illinois, about 200,000 population. He was elected to that position in 2017. He was reelected earlier this year to his second term. He has been considering this for a while now, I would say perhaps several months. He has been talking to some very influential people who will be extremely important should he decide to run. I have contacted him, and I have not been able to reach him to get his statement about this, but I have several reliable sources that confirm all of what I've just told you. So I'm pretty confident that he certainly has been considering, and I'd say there's a fairly good likelihood he will be entering the race officially within 2 to 6 weeks. And if he does that, we now have 4 announced candidates. That would be candidate 5. And as we know publicly, Rodney Davis, Congressman Rodney Davis, has also been considering a run, pending finding out what she'll find out by the end of October, what the remap of congressional districts will look like. If they have made his district, 13th district, very difficult to run in, if they haven't left, if the Democrats who are controlling this whole process haven't left him with some appropriate opportunities to pursue his career congressionally, he will, I think, give serious consideration, as he is now, to running for governor. And if he decides to do that in the GOP primary, we will then have a field of 6. And the important thing there is, folks, I should mention that, I've given you all the important information because I don't think we should judge people by the color of their skin, but instead, as Dr. King said, by the content of their character. So I've left out what some would say is very important, which is Aurora Mayor Richard Irvin happens to be an African-American. Happens to be. Not the most important factor here. Another factor is he's done the equivalent of being on third base, but he wasn't.
I am unfamiliar with him. Do we know, would you describe him as a conservative, or what are his politics?
Well, it's hard to know. My understanding is, as an adult, he's a lifelong Republican. I've been told when we check, if we have the time to do so, to check his primary voting, I've been told that'll most likely show he has been voting in Republican primaries. As you know, municipal elections...
Let me interrupt. Is he being asked to run, or is this his idea? What do you know as far as putting his candidacy or possible candidacy into some context?
My understanding is some very important people have approached him and said they wanted him to consider this, and he has been considering this along with them for a while now. Look, this is not your father's or your grandfather's GOP. As of October 7, 2021, the Illinois Republican Party is quite different and is on the verge of becoming quite different. And there are people who are trying to do this in an organized, thoughtful way. By do this, I mean come up with a field. They're not trying to dictate.
Do you know these people who are asking it? Look, there's a rift in both parties. And you have in the Republican Party of Illinois, the idea that a lot of people have is that the Republican Party of Illinois has not been conservative enough over the years. They point going back to the era of George Ryan, Jim Thompson, Jim Egger, that those were not what they would say true conservatives, that they were supportive of abortion, as an example. So you have Republicans now in Illinois saying what we need is a real conservative. So with that in mind, are the people that are asking Richard Irvin to run, are these people who are the establishment Republicans of long-standing who want a moderate Republican, or are these people what you describe as, would you describe them as conservatives who are getting Richard Irvin to run so that they have a real conservative? Do we have any information along those lines?
The short answer is more the latter. I think these people are real conservatives, but they are real conservatives who want to win in the state of Illinois, which is characterized by many as very blue. It may be less blue than those people think. And that's something that these people who are sitting down with and considering and advising Aurora Mayor Richard Irvin, they're of that view. I think that this is less blue. You know, when you look at the crime situation in Illinois, in Chicago especially, it mirrors other major cities. It's out of control. When you hear Ken Griffin, a man of self-made net worth of about $20 billion, important in Chicago, in Illinois, obviously, but also important in New York and also important in Florida. When he's talking about crime in Illinois, as he has in the last few days, being like Afghanistan, people's ears perk up. When he's talking about, you know, and there are other candidates talking about public corruption, about property taxes.
Let me interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any information? I don't. Do you have any information that Ken Griffin would put some of his money behind a Republican candidate? Because now we have, as you say, a handful of candidates. The list may grow, as we just talked about. But they're going to be running against a multi-billionaire in J.B. Pritzker. And a lot of people, I think the man on the street, a lot of Republicans, like, Pritzker can't be beaten. Number one, they would say, it's a blue state. And number two, he's got more money than God. So unless we get another financial backer, and that might be Ken Griffin, to put money behind some of these candidates. You know, you interviewed recently Jesse Sullivan, and we had a two-part interview running across the state with the interview with Jesse Sullivan. And we said, wow, isn't it great Jesse Sullivan enters a race having raised $11 million? But that's peanuts compared to what J.B. Pritzker can put into the race. So do you have any indication? And I think Ken Griffin just spoke at the Economic Club of Chicago. Did he tip his hand that he might be willing to back any of these Republican candidates and make it a fair race?
I don't know if he specifically said that, but my understanding is yes. He would be willing to, for the right candidate at the right time, give significant backing and perhaps be willing to help back other candidates running for state house, for the state senate, so the Republican Party could be, with a governor who's elected in the state of Illinois, could be credible. He doesn't have to have, that person wouldn't have to have a majority. He just has to be on the move, persuading some Democrats, maybe their best interest is not voting as they have with the majority Democrats. If you start persuading some, you will persuade more. Is Ken Griffin a guy who's pretty thoughtful? Yes, he is. He wasn't born on third base. I'd say he's on third base now. He more than hit a triple. You said that J.B. Pritzker has more money than God. Well, I don't think so. Of course, you were hyperbole, but he doesn't even have more money than Ken Griffin, who is not God. So we clocked J.B. Pritzker in a net worth of about $3.2 billion. We clocked Ken Griffin in with a net worth of about $20 billion, 6 times as much. We also noticed, everybody in Illinois noticed, that J.B. Pritzker lost on his signature issue. That is his whole claim to fame that, the rich aren't paying their fair share and he would have a fair tax. He called it that. Turns out Illinois said that wasn't a fair tax and they rejected it. And he put in $50 million, Pritzker did, and Ken Griffin put in that same amount, so he matched him dollar for dollar, and J.B. Pritzker lost.
You know, it's interesting, though, too, and why this will be an interesting race, and to the point that maybe Pritzker is not assured re-election. You have a context of the national politics with the Biden administration, and their ratings are going down, down, down. People, voters are looking at what's happening at the border. It's just leaking, it's not being enforced. Immigration, it's just an open border. We see the tragedy, in Afghanistan, leaving Americans behind, and the collapse that has. And when you go through any number of things right now, the American people are quickly turning against the Biden administration, and one wonders, when we go to November 2022, to what extent will that dissatisfaction show up in the polls, where maybe Democrats just in Illinois don't turn out like perhaps they would have, and to the context then of possibly having Mayor Irvin, if he were to be the nominee of the Republican Party, that would make it interesting as well. He could address some of these issues of the crime in Chicago. And so often where Governor Pritzker tries to take the approach of saying this or that is due to racism, if he had a black Republican candidate arguing against him, it would certainly make the context of the political debate a little more interesting.
Let's whet the appetite, let's whet the appetite of our viewers a little bit. Let's do what often the mainstream media don't do. Give them some facts about Richard Irvin. Born and raised in Aurora, African-American, single-parent mom, up from very modest surroundings, in the Army out of high school, soldier in Desert Storm back in the early 90s, Robert Morris College here in the city as an undergrad, Northern Illinois University Law School, prosecutor in the assistant state's attorney, an assistant state's attorney in Cook County State's Attorney's Office, so Cook County, prosecutor, assistant state's attorney, Kane County. I'm not sure if they use that title, but he was a prosecutor in Kane County. He was in private practice. While he was in private practice, he became the first African-American elected as alderman in Aurora, and he served there for 10 years as an alderman. He ran for mayor in 2009 and lost. My understanding is, although it's a nonpartisan position, I think people who were noticing that election at that time would have become aware he was a Republican at that time. In 2017, as I said earlier, he won, ran again and won, was the first African-American elected as mayor of Aurora. I might add, of course, if he were to be the nominee of the Republican Party in Illinois for governor, he would be the first African-American to have that title as the nominee. If he were elected governor of Illinois, he would be the first African-American so elected in Illinois. I don't think the Democrats have had a candidate for governor before who in fact is African-American or was African-American. So look, for people who want to focus on race, this is historic, should these events unfold, as I've said they may. And two, it's historic because we have a person running who will not be running on that issue. He will be running on the issues, I believe, that we should be talking about, which we're not. If Governor Pritzker has its way, people think, this is what they allege, we'd like to give him a chance to say, but they say he will make this election about abortion, and he will make it about what he views as successful handling of COVID. Well, I think those issues will be important. They will not be dispositive. They will not be determinative. People are going to look at Governor Pritzker's handling of COVID, and they may have a different view. Whether if we have half the people in Illinois who died of COVID were coming out of nursing homes, did he protect the elderly? Did he have information to do so? Wirepoint says that data existed early on. If he did, why didn't he do more to protect
that's the other
people?
thing.
Let me just finish.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that's an issue. Is COVID, did he do a good job? Is he doing a good job now? Did he close down the schools? I don't mean he specifically ordered that, but did he set the gears in motion to bring that about? Did he set the gears in motion to close down Illinois? More than was necessary. More than was good for the nation's, for the state's.
And that's what I was going to say. The point is that this, all right, let me say something. The point is that whether the governor was right or not, the fact of the matter is, I mean, that'll be up to the voters to decide. The fact is there's a lot of it's a weird election cycle, let's just say that, for all the reasons we're talking about, COVID being one. And no one ran to be the COVID governor. That was thrown on Governor Pritzker's desk. Some people will say he did a great job. Some people will say he did a horrible job, that he kept the state locked down long before it should have been. They point to places like Florida that have opened up. You know, I'm not in a position, I don't think, to really say right or wrong, but I would say there's a lot of division here, and that certainly could splash back. I think the COVID issue is more likely to damage the governor than help him.
Okay, well, let me just interject to say, you raised that issue, okay, about the governor's performance. He is fond of saying he looked at health of the state, of physical health of the people of Illinois, and that was tops in his attention. He says he followed the science. He followed the data. Really? Did he? Because WirePoints puts out a lot of data. They put out an array of states, 50, from deaths per capita, from the worst and the best. And guess what? Florida, when you do that analysis, is outperforming Illinois on health. And they're outperforming Illinois on physical health and economic health. And I want everybody to do what we should be doing, hold my feet to the fire, and let's say, what do the data show? I've seen that at WirePoints. I haven't seen the mainstream data, the mainstream media focus at all on that. I want to see them confront the governor. I want them to see them confront the Republican gubernatorial candidates, and let's see who followed the science, who followed the data.
All right, look, Jeff, we got other things we got to get to.
I don't want to lecture, but let me just point out, this governor's race, my prediction will be about education. It'll be about pensions. It'll be about COVID, protecting the elderly, crime. 2 million kids being sent back to school.
It all depends who the Republican candidate is, to our point. And who knows if it's going to be Richard Irvin, if it's going to be Jesse Sullivan, Gary Rabine, we don't know. The Republican candidate will determine what his agenda is. We know the governor is not going to be talking about crime because he hasn't done anything to really stop it. The voters...
That's not true. No, hold on. The first statement you said, we know he's not going to be talking about crime. That's not true. He has been running already on what he calls the pillars. You know, the pillars of the African-American caucus. Their pillars are criminal justice reform, Terry. And now, as we talk,
and that would be a lot. A lot of people are very critical of that political justice reform. They think it's a soft on crime approach, not a hard on crime. There is growing sentiment, I think, in the electorate, not just in Illinois, but across the country, and Illinois is not immune from the rest of the country, that we have too many prosecutors who are not prosecuting crime. And a lot of people in Illinois, I think, have said, look, this is one more approach. The governor's embraced it. It's turning a blind eye to some of the criminality that's taking place. And people are going to remember the rioting on Michigan Avenue, the breaking down the storefronts. We can't ignore the hundreds of people being shot and killed in Chicago. So I think, the governor's going to have a hard case to make to say that he was effective in managing crime.
When you say we don't know, and it just depends on who the candidate is for governor on the Republican side, that's not entirely true. We do know a few things, Terry. We don't have to be so agnostic.
We'll get to
them. As we talk, we know this morning that the Republicans have come out with a proposal for their view of criminal reform, criminal justice reform that needs to happen. And they're talking about mandatory sentences for people who are repeat offenders, using guns, and significant sentences. And those are proposals they will be making if they're allowed in the Illinois legislature.
They won't be allowed, but you're right, they did have that come out.
We know that Jesse Sullivan, because I interviewed him on Public Affairs, and we know he said, look, you cannot attract business to Illinois if you're going to make Illinois a high crime state and the city of Chicago high crime. So he's making that an issue, and he's tying that to the economy. He's tying that to the people's health in general. as well as their physical health and as their economic health. We know these things, Terry. We know that Gary Rabine's talking. He's a candidate for
Well, look,
governor.
we're about half, we're 19 minutes into the show. Do you want to get to some other issues, or are we going to stay the whole time?
We're going to, folks, we're devoting this to the most important issue for the state of Illinois, the governor's race, primary and general, and the issues that will, in our view, be discussed. And let me just finish. Rabine's talking about jobs. He's talking about crime. He's talking about property taxes. And, Bailey's talking about COVID, and he's talking about vaccination mandates. He's talking about mask mandates.
Okay.
I don't know.
My eyes are glazing over. I'm sorry. We got way too much on this topic.
Your eyes shouldn't be glazing over. Okay. This is the important stuff of the state of Illinois.
The other important thing are pocketbook issues, and the Democrats at the national level want to be increasing taxes, and they say the rich don't pay their fair share.
Americans have a better shot. I'm a capitalist. I think you should be able to go out and make $1 million or $1 billion, but just pay your fair share. Join the crowd, man. They know that this is about dignity and respect. It's about changing the paradigm so the economy works for you, not just for those at the very top. It's about building this economy from the bottom up and the middle out. That's what I've done my entire career. That's why I ran for president. As I said, I'm a capitalist. I think you should be able to make a lot of money in America, but just pay your fair share.
And while the president says that people aren't paying their fair share, according to the Tax Foundation in 2018, the top 1% of income earners pay 40% of all the taxes. The top 5% pay 60%. And Jeff, we are facing a Democratic Party that is open to the accusations that they are the tax and spend party, and that is what they want, that they are the ones funding the deep state. A part of the deep state, certainly in Illinois, we might say, are the schools. And Jeff, as we look at the schools, here's the Chicago Public Schools. They've lost another 14,000 students. It says 2022. Of course, that's not even here yet. That must be a typo. But down 105,000 students versus 2,000. So
but
there you go.
The main point, folks, so your eyes don't glaze over, look at that chart, look on the left side, see fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 2000, 432,000 students approximately, and now go to fiscal year 2022 preliminary, we're down to 327,000 in CPS, almost a 25% decline. Okay, in the last 20 years, people are voting with their feet and they're leaving CPS. Let's go to slide 2 and maybe we can see why they're leaving. Because if 85% of the students in CPS are minorities, Black and Hispanic, and if you're Black, okay, if you're a parent and you have your Black child in CPS, you're kind of frightened by this statistic. The third graders, 30% read at grade level, meet or exceeds expectations. By the time CPS has had your child to the 11th grade, they've made matters worse. Now, 14% are reading at grade level and 85% aren't. If you're Black, I think you should think of going somewhere else. If you have to, go to the suburbs. All the wonderful things he's done for education, how is it over the last 20 years we have those kinds of data? 30%, 14%, depending on the grade that are reading at grade level. Let's go back for a second, if we can, to that chart very quickly, and let's look at Hispanics, okay?
Hang on one second.
One of the parties in Illinois. And I think you're blocking it, if you can, there we go, thanks, Terry. The 11th grade Hispanics, it's a little better, but not much. 25% are reading at grade level of the 11th graders. 75% aren't. And we look at third graders, 37% are reading at grade level. 63% aren't. If you're Hispanic, they're not cutting it. The Hispanic state reps and state senators should be talking about this. I don't think they are. The Republicans running for governor whatever they are, African American, Hispanic, or white, should be talking about this, because these are the data that are important for our minorities, not how many people are getting their share of new marijuana outlets, okay? And let me look at the big trends that you're putting up there now. You can see over the last 20 years, education spending per capita at CPS has more than doubled, while the enrollment has gone down 25%. What's happening here? Are we getting any bang for our buck? I mean, the Governor Pritzker said, well, is it wonderful that the students are leaving and the costs are going up? And we've put up data showing the performance is down. We're not doing as well as Indiana.
You know, this is the thing. Where is the accountability in government? And it goes back to what we just showed President Biden saying people don't pay their fair share, which isn't true. But the other problem with that is there's no accountability in government for spending. And it's at the national level, it's at the state level, it's at the local level. And we see again, CPS, as you just pointed out, the funding has more than doubled in the last 20 years at the same time that these kids are failing. We have a system that pushes kids through a process that is not performing. They're not being educated. You know, a young black child should be getting a good education. He's a young black American child. We need American workers to be educated. And who is holding this system accountable that they are in the 11th grade and 85% of these students are underperforming? Jeff, that's a national shame.
We'll go back to that slide just for a second, because that slide comes from WirePoints, who is putting out the data, which is neutral, which allows us to have this discussion. Without the data, Terry, we're just wandering around. This is the
and I would hope that we, you know, can't look. I often say campaigns are for the people, not for the candidates. We need the issues to be discussed. That's what the campaign should be about. Folks, if you're running for governor or if you're running for anything, state rep, talk about this. Why are we tolerating this? That's the issue. And where's the rest of the news media that doesn't address this? It's like we just are supposed to accept that we are, you know, these kids are not going. It's the way it's always been. We're not educating them, but we're going to be doubling the spending. And I think at some point that we got to say, you know, enough is enough.
Right. Or else we're in the position of having Terry McAuliffe say to the people as he's running for governor of Virginia, well, you know, parents shouldn't be telling the schools what to teach. Well, should they? Should the schools be telling the parents what they think they should teach? And they should teach critical race theory? Is that bubbling up when the people protest as they're allowed by our U.S. Constitution, and they go to their school board meetings to hold their school board members that they elected accountable? Is the FBI now going to be investigating them because they're somehow causing disruption? Is that not going to be allowed in America now? Is that what Merrick Garland, this neutral guy who was...
Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States.
Is he now turning the Justice Department into a handmaiden, if you will, of the teachers unions and the school board associations? Who's running who? Who's accountable to whom? I mean,
well, that's the issue. Jeff, we got 1 minute, so let's start to wrap up here. What do you think? We've talked about a number of things, and it all comes down to we're going to have a campaign coming up. What are the real issues, or are we going to allow the candidates to sweep the real issues under the rug and just talk about what they are talking about? I think the news media has to hold people accountable.
Yeah, I'll be damned if we're going to sit here and not talk about the issues. We'll see how many people follow us. But we're going to talk about pensions. We're going to talk about critical race theory. We're going to talk about who's in control of the schools and whether the parents have the right to voice their opinions.
I can tell you that issue, the critical race theory and in the schools, is boiling the pot. And Jeff, we're going to have to...
And crime, Terry, and crime.
And crime.
They've got a right to be safe in the streets.
All right, we got 10 seconds, folks. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments if you would, and Jeff and I will see you again next time.